The views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the listeners. Listener discretion is advised. ChatGPT and AI technologies were not used or harmed during the creation of this podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to Under the Moon Paranormal Ohio Legends. And always remember, it's a full moon. This podcast comes out every month. It's based on Ohio legends told by me, Melanie, a gal from Ohio with an Ohio accent. And if my accent and my mispronunciations of things don't bother you, then we're going to get along just fine. Okay, so it's February of 2024, and we are towards the end of winter. The groundhog said the spring was coming early, so that's a great thing. So this month's full moon, we'll talk a little bit about that real quick. If 2024 has gotten off to a slow start, the Virgo full moon on February 24th, that's today, marks a turning point where life starts to pick up significantly. This emphasizes the value of hard work and organization through themes around health and wellness also come into play. Now is the time to examine your day-to-day, taking into consideration where manageable changes can be made. Just be mindful to avoid perfectionist attitudes, maintaining reasonable expectations of yourself and others. Remember to support your body as you move through work and personal errands, fueling yourself with nutritious foods while also acknowledging when it's time to take a break. Lingering close to the Pisces Sun, Mercury, Saturn will have their own influence during this event. Mercury promotes clarity, communication, and learning, while Saturn urges us to revitalize outdated structure both personally and collectively. Use this energy you have important conversations with colleagues, loved ones, and members of your community with clear intent to solve issues that need addressing. Unfortunately, not everyone will be eager to get with the program, making it important that you approach a change from a collaborative standpoint rather than dishing out new rules or procedures. You'll also be uniquely positioned to release patterns in order to establish new ones, so be sure to focus on what you can do as an individual. Outside of Luna's domain comes an aligned... Sorry, my page jumped up on me. Outside of Luna's domain comes an line between Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, bringing the focus to the collective. If there are any political situations that have been weighing on you, consider how you can take action. Write to a member of Congress, donate to charity, or volunteer at a local nonprofit to appease your compassionate heart. However, you won't gain much traction from announcing views online, which may stir arguments and have negative impacts on your mood and relationships. Instead, find people with similar goals or beliefs that you can collaborate with, laying down solid groundwork or meaningful changes. Educating yourself further on these issues should also become a priority, though you should remember to pull back if you start to feel overwhelmed, of course. The idea is to acknowledge that you have to control of everything, or without it you're losing hope of over vastly complicated situations you're not equipped to handle as one person. Fluctuations with the economy will become more apparent under Jupiter's command, and there will be plenty of financial movement to keep up with. Avoid impulsive investments, especially if they seem overly trendy or too good to be true. You should also be cautious when accepting or giving advice. as energy at play can inflate or deflate at a moment's notice. Choose the more practical route when it comes to your bank account. Don't be afraid to take gambles that won't hurt you in the event that they don't work out. So just be cautious during this full moon. So, just a quick reminder, this podcast is 100% human made and independent. I do all the research, recording, uploading, all by myself. And thank you all of my listeners from all around the globe, because this podcast wouldn't happen without you. So we're going to talk about the Crybaby Bridges of Ohio. Now, when I dug into this subject, I was appalled to find out there are roughly around, I have a big list of them too. Wow, okay. All the way down here. Yeah, there's about 30 crybaby bridges in Ohio, in just Ohio. We roughly mentioned two of them during a couple of episodes, one in Helltown and one in, where's it at? It's in this list here. Rogues Hollow. Yeah, Rogues Hollow and Helltown both have crybaby bridges. So I'm thinking to myself, are just women in Ohio just like throwing babies off bridges left and right? Like, what is really, really going on here? Okay. So I dug deeper into it. And I just think it's an urban legend that maybe got out of hand in a terrible, terrible way. And I don't understand why they're always like, let's go out to a bridge and see if we can hear a baby crying or a mother or something along those lines. So it's kind of weird. Um, this article is titled Troubled Waterways, The Origins of Crybaby Bridge Legends. They're usually plain looking concrete and steel bridges near and all over Ohio that's supposedly haunted, right? Replace a covered bridge that once crossed Cayuga River that used to be in the town of Boston, of course, since there's a little spot near full of local legends amongst those local teenagers as Helltown, like we have talked about in the previous episode. So you can think of Crybaby Bridges as a modern day folktale, I guess. They come in a variety of designs and sizes, each with its own twist on the basic same story. Sometimes the passed down by word of mouth history for the bridge gets mixed up with other legends. Several instances involve a busload of children killed in an accident. Dusting the back of your car with baby powder will make the little handprints visible when they try to push your car to safety. Sometimes a parked car on the bridge is supposed to have some trouble starting. Aside from these rare deviations from the norm, the basic storyline stays the same. A distraught mother finds herself on a bridge with her child. She tosses her baby over the railing and into the water below. After that, she takes her own life on the site. Other versions talk about husbands killing the wife and the child, or in an automobile accident involving an infant at a bridge. The variations of this tale are endless, but the final result is always a dead baby. The story goes on to say that ever since the murder or accident or suicide, unaliving, you could hear a baby crying at the bridge at night. It is a cautionary tale of teenage pregnancy, I think, that started back in the 50s. Premarital sex or maybe even seatbelts. A warning about untreated postpartum depression or domestic violence could be a part of it too. If we totaled up the number of individual crybaby bridges said to exist across the United States, the number would be well into the excess over 100. In Ohio alone, there are at least 32 crybaby bridges. Perhaps visitors overheard some animal, such as a rabbit in distress, a fox. There are lynx and bobcats out here, that when they scream when they're in mating season, they sound just like a woman screaming. I grew up in the boonies in Ross County. I have heard this myself. So, a catbird screaming in the dark is believed to be a crying baby or a crying mother. Pranksters might have tried scaring kids on Halloween with creepy stories and simple tricks. Maybe the case with one bridge in Ohio where the speakers were found hidden under the bridge, okay? No joke. Either or that or a whole lot of babies have been just tossed off of bridges to scream for all eternity. In Ohio, of course. I mean, it's Ohio. Anything's possible here. So, yeah, we're just gonna say Ohio's full of legends, and Crybaby Bridges just go hand in hand with it. Few people have scoured the archives trying to find any grain of truth behind these spooky bridge stories which have been passed along by word of mouth since the earliest the 1950s. They've spread like wildfire through the internet, occasionally giving approximate dates, sometimes with a name found on nearby road signs or neighboring cemeteries, as, and is told as a true story. The backstory often takes place either in the early 1900s or the 1970s, possibly separating the older legends from the more modern versions. I'd love to research the history of every single Crybaby Bridge there is, but for the sake of time, I wanted to dig into the heart of the myth, itself. I'm perfectly willing to admit that any story of these Crybaby Bridges you may find in your area is just a legend spread by teenagers or parents who crafted the tale so memorably that it lives on as a true story. However, I'm a firm believer that the truth is stranger than fiction, that the foundation of nearly every legend has some grain of truth to it. People rarely invent a story entirely from scratch. It's based on something they've heard, seen, or read about. Could this be true with Crybaby Bridges, though? Apparently, excuse me, believe it or not, we can find evidence that similar events really have happened. Here's a small, brief look at some true stories taken from various newspapers, which could be the foundation of this urban legend. July 19th, 1886, 4-year-old Richard Truffs along Long Beach, New Brunswick, carried a neighbor's baby to a bridge over Tufts Brook and tossed him over the edge. When asked why, he said, "I don't know." November 1st, 1890. Sadie McMullen threw Ella Mae Connors and Delilah Brown, ages 11 and 16 respectively, 70 feet from the New York City Central Trestle Bridge over Murderers Creek in Akron, New York. Before unsuccessfully trying to drown herself, Ella died instantly. Delilah survived but was permanently injured. October 9th, 1900. Harry Stewart snuck out of his home in the 812 Superior Street in Cleveland, Ohio, slit his 2-month-old baby's throat, and threw the body into a nearby sewer. The baby was found a week later at Lake Erie, near Lakeview Park, Suicide Pier. He was arrested in New York City. January 30th, 1914. In one of the most sensational crimes from the history of Spartanburg, South Carolina, Clyde Clement threw his infant daughter, Virginia, off a bridge into Mill Pond of Lawson's Creek. He threatened to leave his girlfriend, Laura Pendleton, if the baby wasn't done away with, and would only marry her after the child was gone. Monster. February 28th, 1914, Mrs. Ralph Densmore, 23, of North Attleboro, Massachusetts, jumped from the Metcalf Street Bridge, clutching her 4-month-old baby, and was struck by a train around 12:30 p.m. She left an unalived note stating that no one will understand her reasons. That's so sad. September 1918. In Wisconsin, an unidentified baby was strangled and thrown into the Milwaukee River near the east of the end of the State Street Bridge. A stone had been tied to its neck to weigh the body down. July 16, 1922, an unknown woman, possibly from Buffalo, New York, clutched a baby jump from the Goat Bridge and went over Niagara Falls into her death. May 1st, 1937, Myrtle Ward tossed her 3-year-old daughter, Louise, off the Colorado Street Bridge in Pasadena, California. The infant's 100-foot tall fall was broken by a tree. The mother jumped afterwards and died instantly. May 23rd, 1972, Keith Hamilton of 17 was seen tossing the infant of the 19-year-old girl and her 16-year-old male companion into the Ohio River. At 2 a.m. from the 17th Street West Bridge in Huntington, West Virginia. It turned out to be a hoax. The baby was a doll, and all 3 were charged with juvenile delinquency. So, there was no more reports after that hoax in Ohio, of course, until February 16th, 2010. Following a domestic dispute, Admir Rahim threw his 3-month-old daughter off the Garden State Parkway's Driscoll Bridge near Sayreville, New Jersey. You might ask, what's the point of mentioning these? None of these news stories deal with any crybaby bridges I've read about on the internet. You're right, but my point is that similar stories have actually happened and have been reported in the news for over 150 years. While infant bridge deaths might sound like pure fiction, some of real-life tales can be even more bizarre. There are a few possible ways the other true crimes tie into with the Crybaby Bridge legend. In some cases, the stories might be pure fiction, but at least a few stories could be real accounts, altered by relocated to spookier places. Also, we can't deny the possibility that some of these stories could be true tales, either literal or embellished, dealing with actual locations. Of course, the difficulty in this finding concrete historical proof. If any Crybaby Bridge stories are based on real events, there is documented evidence somewhere out there, and you know where to look for it. To dismiss all Crybaby Bridge as an urban legend and contemporary folklore doesn't really do them justice. Just because a story might be extremely unusual or even unfathomable doesn't make it fiction. Perhaps we prefer to think of these events as myths instead of facing the reality that horrible, wicked things can and do happen. Real monsters aren't, crocodiles in sewers or ghostly goatmen. They're the darker side of humanity hiding inside the minds of people. People are the monsters. We read about the ones that escaped into reality every day in the news or find them lurking with passive-aggressive menace on social networking sites. What makes these tales of Crybaby Bridges so popular isn't just the fact that they deal with mysterious supernatural themes. It's the fact that they remind us of the dangers within humankind. I'm not as scared of the idea of a crying dead baby as I am of a psychopath with a rifle lurking in the woods or near a bridge itself. So that's my conclusion on my thoughts of the Crybaby Bridge legends. So, just real quick, we're going to run through the list of known Crybaby Bridges in Ohio. Abbeville Road Bridge. Abbeville Road Railroad Bridge. Alliance Crybaby Bridge. Black Rabbit Road Crybaby Bridge. Brew Baker Road Covered Bridge. Cable Train Overpass. Cedarville Crybaby Bridge. Clinton Crybaby Bridge. Crybaby Hill, Harris Jones Cemetery. Crybaby Lane, Euler Road. Crybaby Tunnel. Crying Bridge. Crystal Springs Crybaby Bridge. Egypt Road Crybaby Bridge. Fudge Road. Gore Orphanage Road Crybaby Bridge. Greeley Chapel Road Crybaby Bridge. Helltown Crybaby Bridge. Hyde Road Crybaby Bridge. Left Veer Road Crybaby Bridge. Mary Jane's Bridge. Myrtle Hill Road Crybaby Bridge. Newton Falls Covered Bridge. Palmer Road Crybaby Bridge. Pfeiffer Crybaby Bridge. Philo Crybaby Bridge. Pitchin Crybaby Bridge. Rogues Hollow Crybaby Bridge. Screaming Bridge. Sydney Crybaby Bridge. Stover Road Crybaby Bridge. Tyndall Bridge. And last, Wisner Road. All right, so I'm going to add a link to the Ohio Crybaby Bridge project, which has this list. And if you know a Crybaby Bridge that's not mentioned on here, you can submit it and they will add it to the list and check it out. All right, so now we're going to get into our listener submitted story. It's real short and sweet, which I love. This is from Jeff in Dayton, Ohio. Jeff was driving with his 3-year-old son, Miles, in the back seat when they passed a cemetery. It was a modest cemetery with only flowers and small plaques. It basically looked like a giant garden, Jeff explains. According to Jeff, as they drove by, his toddler, who'd been happily singing, abruptly stopped, pointed to the cemetery, and exclaimed, "Wow, look at all those people." Jeff turned to look, but didn't see a soul. Physically confused, he asked Miles what he was talking about. "All those people over where?" His son replied, "There sure are a lot of grandmas." Chills ran down his spine as he speaked with his son what the people were doing. "They're just all standing there looking down at the grass," Miles said. Completely unsettled by the conversation, Jeff sped up and drove home. Later that same day, he says his young son was watching TV when he turned to Jeff and said, "You know, they weren't alive." Thinking Miles was referring to the cartoon, Jeff asked what he meant. "Those people we saw, they were all paused," his son said. "I don't know if my kid has a sixth sense," Jeff says, "or if he just has a very wild imagination." Jeff, I think he saw a lot of grandmas. So speaking of cemeteries and grandmas, I am in a community of people that go to cemeteries and speak to folks that maybe haven't been spoken to in a long time. We're called the Graveyard Shift on YouTube, and it all started with a ghost brother named Dalen Spratt. Check out his Graveyard Shift channels, and his videos are awesome. He uploads every day, almost. I upload my videos once a week. They are graveyard shifts as well, where I go and just kind of speak to, a headstone with my spirit box. So check those out. And if you have your own story that you want to submit, please email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com. And I'd love to read your story on the podcast. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it with a friend. Hit the notification bell so you know when the next full moon is, and another episode will be there waiting for you. So until next time, I'll keep the fire warm for you guys. Stay spooky, my friends.